Good afternoon. How's the sound? Okay? All right. So we are going to go ahead and get started because I know there's going to be a lot of interaction with our robust dialogue with our presenter today. I am Josetta Coleman, and yes, I am not on that screen. So one of the things that we're going to talk about when we talk about diversity and inclusion and what success looks like is agility. And this is a perfect example of being agile. So we had some transition in leadership because of illness, work obligations, and so guess what? Terry and I are agile, and we are here.
I wasn't agile enough because I am here, so it's like, I don't know, yeah.
So we are here, and I appreciate so much that he is here. I told him earlier, I would have been up here tap dancing, reciting some Maya Angelou, you know, we would have made it work, but.
Amazing Grace.
Amazing Grace, but we made it work. So with that, I am Josetta. Okay. I am Josetta Coleman, and I have the pleasure of really developing our strategic footprint on professional development within Advancing Black Pathways, which is what we call a center of excellence within J.P. Morgan Chase. Our focus is primarily focused to laser focus in with our line of business partners to enhance the career trajectory of our internal employees around getting the careers that they desire. Not just what you kind of get by your
black
title.
employees,
And black employees, blackity black, as we're saying. We also have a commitment to our community. So we say Advancing Black Pathways, we have put money behind our talk in our communities, both for entrepreneurship, both for development in our communities around housing. We also have done boot camps for women. Lots of other ways we're trying to ensure that our communities are able to be self-sustaining and grow so that the future generations will not be where many of us are. Whereas when you think about where we are, many of us are either first generations of college graduates and or we are really first generation corporate America. So we want to make sure we continue to build platforms to change that paradigm and also change the customers that we interface with because our customers will look like us and have a bank that they know represents them. So with that, I also have the pleasure of saying Thelma Ferguson, who you see here on the slide, and Bonnie Elliott, who leads Advancing Black Pathways, are two phenomenal partners for Advancing Black Pathways who could not be with us. But I do have the pleasure of the dynamic, the impactful, the person that you want to have at your corporate table as an advocate, as a sponsor, Terry Woodard, who is the vice chair in our private bank. Terry, thank you.
Can you come with me on all meetings? And, people wouldn't believe you. Wait a minute, before we start, how many people here are Chase clients? Yeah, clients. You bank with Chase, or you have a mortgage with Chase, or you have a credit card from Chase. Look. So, yeah, that's good. We have a friendly audience. That's good. That's good.
And thank you for your business. Thank you for this. So with that, Terry and I are just going to have a conversation. And if you have questions, Terry said he's open. If you hear something we say and you have a comment or you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. We only have the 2 mics, so we'll pass it around. And we also will have a formal Q&A at the end.
And if you disagree, raise your hand. Disagree. It's all cool.
All right. So we're going to start off just so you can learn. You heard me talk about Terry. And Terry has such a phenomenal career, and he's very much at the table to be an active voice in our corporation and in our communities. And I just like to have him introduce himself around what are some of the things that happened in his career and decisions he made or experiences that he had that has created the corporate leader that he is currently. Terry?
Wow. That's a tough one. So my career is 40 years. I know I don't look it, but yes, 40 years. And so I went to Morehouse College, graduated Morehouse, started my career at Chase Manhattan Bank. Initially in audit, I was an accounting major in college. 6 months in, I hated it. Sorry for any accountants out there. And, you know, did probably what most of you have done at some point in your career, start talking to different people about what they do and how did they get to where they are. And, you know, decided on I wanted to be in more of a client-facing role, primarily because I thought it was far more dynamic than what I was doing, but also because it paid more, to be totally honest. So I went about what I needed to do in order to make that happen, and I went through with back then what was the Chase Credit Training Program, which was like the management training program, and ultimately landed where I am today, which is in Chase Asset Management, private banking. So currently, I am a managing director and vice chair in the private bank. I cover clients, ultra net worth clients, which for us is $25 million or more. And I cover about 65, 70 clients. About 10% of them look like us. You know, it's been great. I mean, it's a great gig because you get to meet very dynamic people who have amazing stories, how they've been successful. And, you know, if you do it right, you get close enough that you build these kind of relationships that last. So those little corny commercials you see on TV where the banker goes to the weddings and all that, it actually does happen. You know, you do get invited to the family events, and people look at you more as a trusted advisor than they look at you as a salesperson trying to peddle product. And that's what I like about my job. And I'm sure a lot of you guys have jobs similar like that.
One of the things you said, Terry, that I want to just pull out with some of these pearls of wisdom, the relationship. You heard a lot about being invited to the wedding. When that happens, when it's a relationship. So one of the key things that is a part of Terry's success as a corporate citizen and as a stellar banker, but also as a sales leader, is around relationship building. So I want to make sure you kind of hang on that. And relationship building and that salesmanship that's aligned with that doesn't just happen because he's selling a product. It's not about a product. It's the relationship and meeting that need. And so that happens whether you're in HR, that happens whether you are in retail, that happens even if you are an analyst or if you're in compliance, because all of us interface with different people to build relationships.
Yeah, no, relationships are huge. And, you know, they just don't happen, right? I mean, you have to work at it to build relationships because for me, it's about meeting someone and building credibility. And that doesn't happen overnight. You gotta, you know, do what you say you're gonna do. You gotta deliver. You gotta be honest. You gotta be transparent. You gotta be all those things, sometimes even vulnerable to, you know, when things don't happen, to say, hey, I'm sorry. Trust me, I say that every day to somebody. But it is, it's sort of funny because when you think about it, you know, even talking about sponsorship and mentorship, and people come to you, oh, I want you to be my mentor. And it's like, I don't know you. How am I going to be your mentor? But we can start by trying to build a relationship, and if we can get to the point where we feel comfortable with each other, that a mentorship opportunity exists, then let's do that. But, you know, it doesn't happen overnight, folks. It's something you have to work at, and it's a two-way street. So, you know, I know that wasn't part of your question.
No, but that's exactly right. That's what we're here for. When we talk about that mentorship, that's a good lead in to some of our topic here around the inclusion piece. Many of us, I had actually had a discussion with someone prior to this around, well, what are y'all doing around diversity, equity, inclusion? And did the efforts that we are doing in this space really happen after George Floyd? Has that happened to any of you all? It's kind of like that period. Everybody say, is it before George Floyd or after George Floyd? I see head shaking. Okay. Well, we have been engaged in many efforts even prior to George Floyd. But one of the things that I love a comment that Terry made in a meeting we were at was really focused around, we have great work that we're doing in diversity, and we're working very strongly around our equity. But we really want to really move toward that inclusion piece. And what does that mean? And so I'd just like you to give a little bit of dialogue around kind of that timeline, or that your thought process around what organizations should look like and be doing as they're moving from the diversity to the equity, to really, what is inclusion in the workplace when we think about Black to Black?
Black to Black. Yeah, I mean, look, the DE&I is sort of interesting. I mean, over the course of my career, we've talked about diversity on and off. When times are good, they talk about diversity. When times are bad, they don't talk about diversity. And quite frankly, the D was all about awareness, right? It's like, okay, we have to have more diversity. Okay, guess what? Look, we got diversity now. But what about equity? Do we all have the opportunity? Do we all have the equal opportunity to be successful? Do we have equal opportunity at the next position? Do we have equal opportunity in compensation? Do we have equal opportunity when it comes to that next job? Question, right? Inclusion. Okay, are you in the room when they talk about you? Or is somebody in the room that looks like you when they talk about you? That's inclusion to me, because all that other stuff doesn't really mean a whole lot to me. What means a lot to me is, am I in the room, or is there somebody in the room who understands me as a Black professional, who can speak and advocate for me in that room? Because if it's all just a bunch of white people, how is that diversity? And how do you get inclusion that way? So, it's like someone would say, you've been invited to the party, but you can't talk and you can't dance. I don't know. I don't want to go to that party. So that's what the E and the I, as far as I'm concerned. Are we in the room? Who's in the room? Who's advocating for you? Who's speaking up? Who's squashing all the inequities? Who's squashing all of those false impressions that people have developed over the decades about Black professionals? Somebody needs to be in there to do that. And that's when you have inclusion, in my book.
One of the things that you talk about being at the table is, I often, as I coach leaders, and we talk about the folks that are in this room, it doesn't just start at the C-suite. A lot of us focus at the top of the house, and there's a strong accountability. But it also happens where you sit, because we have to have a pipeline of leaders that can move up. And a lot of what happens where there's a lack of a pipeline for the C-suite is because we haven't done the right work at the other levels. So it's important that as you all are taking this back and developing who you are to be at that table, that you also own that accountability to ask the question, like Terry's talked about, or to be that person at the table and represent. And it may not be your employee, but if you know you're going into a talent discussion and you're the only one in that room, sometimes it's incumbent upon us to make it my business to know the other folks that I may be impacting, because there's not anybody that's going to speak upon them about their work ethic within the BRG, about how they interface and work with me on a project, about how I heard them facilitate and present XYZ information. Be comfortable being the voice in the room.
Well, let's circle back a little bit. So, oftentimes, I'll just, my own experience, when I graduated college, my father, who worked for New York Transit, he was a conductor, he said, son, you've graduated Morehouse, great, so proud of you, now you're going to start your career, you keep your head down and do good work. And that was what he told me. And I was like, okay, go in there. I just kept my head down, I did good work. And I watched person after person go past me. And then I said, well, why the hell am I not getting recognition? And so the moral of that story is keep your head up and keep your eye on the ball. But, it's not just the good work. I mean, if you work in corporate America, you know that that's just one component of what you need to do in order to be successful. So to circle back on this inclusion thing is, how do you get included? And that's building that network, building those relationships with people that don't look like you, probably don't look like you. And so that becomes actually very important, almost as important as doing good work, because we all know that we work for people who aren't necessarily the best at what they do, but they've been great at the other thing. And so how do you begin to create what I call professional intimacy? That level of intimacy that allows you to make relationships with people who can and who are in that room, who will advocate for you, who will use their political capital for you, for your well-being, and for your advancement. That takes time. And that's not something, quite frankly, I was very good at initially, and I would probably suspect a lot of people out here haven't been very good at as well. And that's the muscle that you have to develop. Because at the end of the day, just because you do great work isn't going to be, the factor that gets you promoted or gets you that next job. It's going to be, yes, you did great work, but hey, I like you. And the only reason I know I like you is because I've gotten to know you. And the only reason I've gotten to know you is because you probably had to take that first step. You had to be the one to say, hey, let's grab coffee, or hey, let's do dinner, or hey, God, maybe even come to my house, Those are the things that happen, folks. Those are the relationships that are built around you. And that's why those other folks are advancing the way they advance. It takes us a little while to figure that part of it out. And once we do, usually that means that we're some period of time behind the 8 ball. We got to catch up. And all I'm saying is that's a muscle you have to develop and work on and build, and then couple that with that great work that I know you do. And then let's see what happens with regards to the inclusion piece.
Good point, great point. You also mentioned one, and I know one that I heard was, you here to do good work, not to make friends. Another one of those misnomers that we get told as black folks coming into the work environment, that unfortunately, as Terry said, our work environment relationships, we have to have some level of being able to.
Yeah. I mean, look, you even in your own relationships, right? You only invite folks in that you like. So what makes it any different, right? I mean, and I don't know, I observe the chemistry amongst the OC level folks. It's clear that their relationship extends outside of that building. Mm-hmm. It's very clear. So does your relationship extend outside of the building?
That's a really good point. So you heard another nugget. I talk about my pearls of wisdom, is evaluate, do you have relationships that extend outside of the building? And how might you go about doing that? Whether it's grabbing a coffee, whether it's, I like to say, we had a speaker, and I will give her credit for this, Joyelle Crawford. We brought her in to talk about mentorship and sponsorship. She's phenomenal. And she talked about professional stalking. How well do you really know the person that you're trying to build a relationship? So do you know they have 2 kids, they play golf, they're a fan of XYZ, okay? So you have something to create that dialogue, because it then helps build that relationship when they ask, I thought I saw you at the soccer field, how did the team do? Or XYZ, did you watch the game, or whatever? Whatever it may be, think about, and some of that happens, as I said, when you're sitting in a room, listen, that professional stalking, and keep track. How many of you all use a client relationship management kind of system? Anybody use that in your work? Okay. It's nothing more than doing that for yourself. You are the product that you're supporting, okay? And with that, these client relationship managers and professional stalking enhance how you're viewed as that product. So that's where you want to build those relationships that Terry just talked about.
Yeah, it's all familiarity. Yes.
Can you add one more component to that? Since some of them wanting to be working remotely up in town, they connections when all of our interactions are through, video conference.
You can go ahead. No, look, I agree. I think that's very challenging. That's the one thing about, this new paradigm.
Correct.
It's hard to build those relationships when you're just a little square in a box. And that's why, as nice in some ways as it is to like be able to work from home, sometimes you got to take yourself into the office, and because that's where this happens. So if you did not have that connectivity prior to COVID, it's going to be hard to build it if you're going to be virtual, because you just don't have the connectivity. You just don't have that personal interaction that it takes in order to build relationships. Mm-hmm. And just to go back to, sort of the foundation of this networking, oftentimes people are like, well, I'm not going to do that. That's, why do I have to do that? This is my personal life. I don't want to bring them into my life. And it's like, well, okay, but you work for these people, so they are in your life. It's like in some way, shape, or form, they're in your life. And it's like you have to be willing to be somewhat vulnerable in that environment. And that means giving up little pieces of yourself at a time. Little pieces of yourself. Nobody says come in and open up the whole book and tell them everything, but give them little pieces. I play golf. Oh, I went to dinner at such and such place. Have you ever done that before? Oh, you ski. I want to learn how to ski. Where do you normally go? People love to talk about themselves. If they don't do nothing else, they love to talk about themselves. And all of a sudden they look at you a little differently than they did before, because if it's all just business, then that's not, that's one thing. But it's the personal connection that makes people sort of look at you differently. Yes?
How would you say you would teach younger generation, like my students, very young individuals, and they don't necessarily see the value of doing that, of letting people in their want to showcase themselves, and it's hard to explain to them why that is important.
A term that I recently heard, and I don't know if you all would agree with this, but having a young adult in my house, one of the terms is that this generation is very in tune to feedback, and they want it consistently and a lot, and it's almost like the caregiver generation. So it's like, in school, it's constant feedback. And many of us, we work and you get your review, but they want constant response and reaction. So part of that interaction about relationship building is talking about it in real time. And that's just adjusting it to say real-time engagement, real-time quick feedback. And to your point, you modeling the way around those little bits around relationship and say, hey, we got key stakeholders, this is what you can do, because they want to have fast career paths. So part of that fast career path and that immediate feedback is quick real-time feedback, build it into your interactions with them, not necessarily for that huddle time, but actually within the activity, and then align it with, who else can help you with this, and make the referral, that caregiver. You kind of have to direct them a little bit more.
Yeah, so, two different ways. Hiring, right? We definitely are much more focused on hiring diverse talent into the firm. But once they get there, developing and cultivating that talent. So that means, whether it be formal mentorship programs. At JP Morgan, we have about 170 MDs. And so I would say out of the 170, at least 75% of them are cultivating an ED or a VP that's behind them, so that we begin to build that pipeline of talent so that, the opportunities the opportunity for the elevation to the C-suite isn't going to happen for me, but it will happen for maybe one or two generations behind me. But we got to build that pipeline so that that happens. And then also being very vocal when we do have opportunity to talk to senior management about that as well. So we're starting to see folks being put into positions where clearly if they're successful, you can see them elevating themselves in the firm. And that is the first time I would say in a long time I've seen something like that happen.
Jim?
Kind of going back to EPNR. So we talked about your story. So it's been about 2 years since they implemented, and many organizations, they moved from conversation to action. So what are some practical ways that if you work in moving the needle and creating actionable plans to show our sustained commitment to EPNR?
It's a great question. And several things that come to mind. One is our boot camps. We have a focus around our financial wealth and generational building. And the boot camps that we're doing in various targeted cities, high impact cities, is to help the small business owner who would not have the access to the resources we're coming and providing them with coaches, financial advisors, bankers that will help them structure their business. The human resources part, all of those, the marketing part, branding part. We have whole teams coming in that they can go through the series of courses at no cost to enhance what they're going to take back to their communities with their businesses. So that's one sustaining change that we also are doing. The other is around our hiring. We're expanding our hiring. We are having a diverse sourcing group that is very dedicated to not only driving talent at entry level, but at C-suite. Terry's being very modest, but Terry is very much an advocate in what we call our Black Executive Forum, which we also formed, and they have had a very, very active voice in ensuring that what we call our OC committee, our operating committee, is at the table and being accountable and really hearing the voice of these leaders around what we should be doing to ensure we have a pipeline, and not people quitting on the job, but having active engagement and support around things like this. One of the other ones I'll talk about is just how we are actually giving money. Yeah.
Yeah, I assume a lot of people have heard about that, right? The $30 billion commitment. A lot of that was going towards affordable housing and rent, but a significant portion was going towards philanthropy associated with the Black community. Another portion of it was going to small businesses. So that is something that can be measured. And so to your point, it's not just about the talk. It's like, okay, can we measure the success? Mm-hmm. And so we put the stake in the ground, and we're starting to measure that to see how successful we have been about deploying the money. Obviously, rising interest rates has a negative effect on the housing component of it, but there was a portion of it about rents, affordable rents as well. But also, we have other targets. Like Jamie had committed to hire 10,000 Black students over the course of a 5-year period. That's something that people gets called on every year. It's like, where are we in that particular, effort? When 5 or 6 years ago, we had 65, 70 Black MDs. Today we have 170. That was yet again another, Jamie target. It's like, I want to get 200. How long is it going to take for that to happen? So you're starting to see, more action, but you're also seeing what is even more important, which is the accountability associated with it.
Just to follow up on that, that's where I was going was, there are a lot of companies moving efforts. Profit expression, so outside of the investment, any other ways that you work really hard to measure is proven out of efforts outside of the monetary efforts. I don't know if anyone has any ways to share how companies are measuring the proven out of efforts, because there's a lot of pressure on companies to really be transparent about those efforts as well. And trying to understand, I think a lot of companies are also putting a lot of their attention towards the hiring and the pipeline, but in this bigger market, retention is even more difficult. And so to the extent that we can talk a little bit more about what we're doing for retention beyond mentorship and sponsorship, right? Trying to identify the root causes of what's driving issues with keeping the talent. You know, get them here is one, keep them here is one, it's really one fit. But I'm interested in hearing a little bit more than one that we to share about what we're doing to retain the talent and how we're measuring the efforts, not just monetarily, but programmatic efforts as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, just let me, 1 second, I'll get to you. I would just say this about the retention, and I'll talk about the banking industry. There's a certain number of black folks in the banking industry, period, right? And so everybody, I think we've agreed, has been hyper-focused on diversity, whether it's pre or post, right? So if I'm at B of A or I'm at a competitor and I want a black professional to fill a role, where am I going to go? I'm going to go to JP Morgan, I'm going to go to wherever and try to steal one of their talents. So what we see is really out of the left pocket into the right pocket, because we're not bringing any additional, the important thing is bringing more talent into the pool. And right now, all we see is people being circulated within the community. So from my perspective, the more important issue is how do we get more people in the pool, because then that will eliminate some of what you just talked about, which is the retention. If we were just talking about a colleague of ours, name will not be said, got a call. Hell of a great job, different bank, probably wasn't going to get that job where he was. Of course he's going to take it. I mean, you'd be crazy not to. But the problem is we just don't have enough people in the pool so that, the retention component. So this whole DE&I is about retention. But you can't retain if you don't have the opportunities and the other bank does or the other company does or whatever. And you say, well, I don't see it here, but I see it over there, and that's where I'm going. So I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. You were going to.
I just wanted to get a question you asked about where the company is doing from Scott Burger and Cisco, and we just launched a social justice initiative in 2020 where we're looking at 3 areas of our internal employees around proximity, making sure that they have access to leaders, for payment and pay and promotion velocity, to make sure that folks that are sitting in the grade are actually being looked at equitably, to make sure that they're being promoted at the same rate as their peers, and also just kind of looking at opportunity for leadership and representation to make sure there's more black folks in leadership. So we decided to take those 2 pieces, and we have been doing mentoring and coaching on the lower end to drive more attraction for our early career. So we've been able to raise those numbers. At the same time, also making sure that people inside the company are getting a fair look from a fairness perspective. We've been able to increase the number of representations in our higher grades, senior manager, director, senior director, and vice president. So those are the 2. I mean, it's not magic, right? It's that does the company have the will, and will the company have executive leadership and sponsorship to say, we're going to take a chunk of our money and put directly towards this population, and then we're going to measure it. So we've increased our overall African American representation from 5.2% to 7.2% over the last 2 years. And we feel like we're just kind of getting started for that. The retention piece is our EROs, so our Connected Black Professional organization, and a cross-sectional membership across other EROs. We're finding that there's people who have left Cisco 2 years ago, but they stayed because of the culture and the fact that they can get paid a good wage, but also have the work-life balance that they're looking for. Some people are chasing the money. Nothing wrong with that. If that's where you are in life and want to go get the money, there's folks that are paying. It's got to be aware that that culture typically comes with the price. And a lot of us may not want to see that price. But those are the things we're doing. We're just kind of taking stuff that we're already doing, just got better at it, we think. Kind of partnered with our Black PRO and the leadership to ask questions. No point in trying to create something for the community. You're not asking the community what's good, what works. And we just kind of raised the piece. And we got all the way from our CEO, Chuck Robbins, to our EVP and other folks all the way down to the directors like myself, who are responsible for running the programs. We get that access back to those top leaders, and they're asking questions about, what you they can pull inside their company. My suggestion would be just try to get that executive leadership and say, I think there's some changes we can make in some of these areas. Are you willing to kind of be the person on point to kind of keep us hold us accountable? And so far, it's working out.
Thank you so much for that feedback and those great points that we can share with everybody. You brought up a great point, well, for Terrence, about employee resource groups.
Yeah.
And I just want to highlight, again, the active role that you played, and just want to have you share what that has done for your leadership style and career, and some of the things you've advocated around employee resource groups, because those are really big within our organization, probably big within a lot of others, and I know you've had a lot of experience there.
Yeah, so I co-chair our Black employee networking group we call BOLD. So we have 20,000 employees across the country that are members. And, you know, since being in that role, it's just, I do a lot of listening. A lot of listening, because in that role, most of the employees that are members are junior, so they're VP or below. And so, you know, hearing what they're going through, hearing what, you know, are their challenges, and trying to figure out how to make life better for them. And, you know, how we can use the Black Executive Forum, which is the MDs, to be supportive of the junior talent and cultivate that junior talent in the firm. And also just sort of be, you know, really intentional around programs that we think would be helpful in developing and cultivating and retaining some of that junior talent. So it's been a very interesting role for me, but it's also been a rewarding role, because I feel like this gentleman over here made a lot of good points. What can you do to be impactful? What can you do to be impactful within the firm in the mission of DE&I, not just speak the letters, but actually do things that are going to drive the effort forward. So there were some hands that went up over there. Yes?
I work for a customer, and I'm on the my council. And one of the responses that we have, we spoke about relationship. We have a small pocket of individuals who are who are feeling left out. And I'm on the council. I don't know how to address that. I've been working my career for almost 20 years on science, and I've been in this role solely to say about 15 years after the Black man. And so now it's our turn. How do you address that other population, that small pocket, to say, hey, I'm working left out. What happens to me is the same.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, that's a good question. Yeah, it's sort of like, you know, you had to anticipate that, right? I mean, the pie is the pie, and the way it gets divided up, you know, so somebody had to give up a little bit of their pie for us to have some pie, right? And so, you know, yes, they feel threatened, or they feel like, you know, what about us? We've been left out. You know, we got the women thing, we got the Black thing, we got the Latin thing. What about us? And the fact of the matter is that, you know, we make all of these analysis around diversity and why diversity is important. And so either you buy into that or you don't, right? Either you buy into the fact that a diverse community is going to be more productive, more successful, more profitable. Either you buy into it or you don't. And, you know, so there's always going to be those guys that you're talking about, no matter what, no matter how you frame it, they're going to still feel like you got my job, right? Because, of course, you know, it's my inherent right to have that job. You know, my people founded this country. You know, it's like, we built it, but they founded it. But, you know, I don't know. I mean, I wish I had a more eloquent answer for you, but I feel like, you know, it's the numbers, it's just the analysis that has gone in is proven that having a diverse community is better. And so either you're going to buy it or you're not going to buy it. I'm not smart enough to come up with a better explanation.
Yeah, I probably better recommend that I have to really get better insecure about. Honestly, I'm the leveling the playing field. Somebody's going to be hurt or not good.
It's not even hurt. It's like we're leveling the playing field. I mean, let's think about that. It's like we're trying to make it fair for everyone, right? We're trying to make it truly an equal opportunity situation. And it hasn't been. And you have to admit that that is the case. It hasn't been. So in order for it to course correct, this is what happens.
And you have to think, even with that inequity, there still is a heavy weight on pay that is not balanced, even now. So they may be feeling a little slighted, but they're paying a whole lot better than the average person in some of these markets, if you look statistically wise.
It's funny. Someone used to say anyway, that in order for diversity to exist, you have to have a meritocracy. Think about that. You have to have a meritocracy. But guess what? Even if you have a meritocracy, it doesn't guarantee diversity. Because there's always going to be that guy or that woman, right? So I don't use the word fair, because what the hell is fair? But but if we want to truly have diversity, we have to consider that in the decisions that we make. Otherwise, what are we going to have? We'll just have what we've always had, and that's not going to work. So, yes.
So, one thing that tends to be quite important for us, I'm with the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, I'm in the Office of DEI, along with Talent Acquisition, is we're growing our workforce. And we have seen in the last 10 months, the number of persons of color go from 20% of the organization to 25% of the organization. And we're proud of that growth. Being a national organization, big $6 billion endowment, we're really thrilled about what we're seeing. But my question for you is, how do we influence the selection of black and brown talent in the upper echelon of the organization? I don't just want to hire individuals that are mid-level managers and individual contributors and specialists, but when we have openings for C-level staff, how do we as DE&I practitioners engage with the executive leadership team, the steering committee, to really influence their decision to hire black professionals in the highest ranks of the organization?
Yeah, that's, you guys ask all these hard questions. It's like, part of me says that that's the board, right? Part of me says that that's the board. The board has to be the one pushing that button to say, I mean, we talk about DE&I, well, they're ESG too, right? And so, the S, the E and the S and the G, I mean, and that's at the board level. And I think that for us, I would say, we have advocates on the board who are pushing those buttons to say, what are we doing about, greater representation at the senior levels of the organization, putting it back on the senior manager of the firm to do something about it and holding them accountable. So the pressure has to come up there in order for that to happen. I mean, we can make a lot of noise, in which we do, whenever we have an audience with the OC, we bring it up. But at the end of the day, I think they're being held accountable by the board. So, I would say, get the board's ear. If it's not happening, get to the board and let the board know that people want greater representation, and how do we get it? And that's part of the board's responsibility. I don't know, maybe
Nope.
brother over here has a different perspective on that.
No, I think what the gentleman talked about, mid-level managers and whatnot, I think that's an easy place, especially with an early career in mid-level managers, it's easy place for a lot of president. But one thing I would caution on is there is this notion of that once you get some white faces up in the system, moving on up, things are going to change. What I would also encourage you to do is hold them accountable to make sure that when those people get to those roles, they also have black and brown people in their leadership team. Because what ends up happening a lot of times, and there was a hard business you studied came out some years back, maybe about 4 years ago, is that the only demographic that gets dinged, that doesn't get dinged for championing diversity are white men.
Right.
Everybody else's career that they get seen to be kind of leaning too heavily toward women's rights or LGBT rights or what have you, they actually philosophy starts to slow down. So you find that a lot of those upper level folks, once they get there, the very first thing they start talking about is not advancing black people, but we need to look out for all people.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but I'm black. So I'm gonna look out for black folks.
Yeah.
Into an area where I can affect them. Because we've been so disproportionately,
Affected.
by not being.
Yeah.
So I think the thing that you talked about having those speaking this issue is good, but make sure they the skin coat thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, it's funny you make that point because it used to be, we had one here, one there, and it would always get critics to say, like, once they got there, they pulled the ladder up and shut the door. It's like, hey, can't afford to have another, it's like, but hopefully we've gotten beyond that. But my point to this brother over here was that the pressure has to come from the governing body in order for that to happen. Okay, I'm sorry.
No. We are at 2:52, so that means we have had a dynamic discussion. I want to thank all of you all for coming. Please feel free to connect with us. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you.